What would you do if someone offered you $100,000 a year right now? No experience required, no complicated interviews, just one signature, and your life would change overnight. Sounds like a dream, right? That's exactly what I thought too. But here's the part that still keeps me awake at night. I said no. And for 5 years, I believed that was the biggest mistake of my life until the day I found out what was really behind that offer. And by then, it was already too late to go back. I still remember the room where it happened. It wasn't fancy, just a small office with white walls and a glass table that reflected everything, even my nervous hands. The man sitting across from me smiled in a way that felt practiced, not warm, not cold, just perfect. "You're exactly what we're looking for," he said. That sentence alone made my heart race. Because at that time, I was nobody. No stable job, no savings. Just a degree that didn't seem to matter anymore. I had been rejected so many times that even a simple "we'll call you back" felt like a victory. And now this? A six-figure offer? It didn't make sense. I laughed, thinking it was a joke. But he didn't laugh back. Instead, he slowly pushed a document toward me. "This is your contract," he said. "You can start next week." I looked down at the paper. The number was real, $100,000. My hands started to shake. Not because I was excited, but because something didn't feel right. Have you ever had that feeling? When everything looks perfect on the outside, but inside, there's a quiet voice telling you to stop. I tried to ignore it. I told myself I was overthinking. I needed this job. I needed this money. My parents were getting older. My bank account was almost empty. And my friends were all moving forward with their lives. This was my chance. Maybe my only chance. "Is there anything you'd like to ask?" he said. There were 100 questions in my mind, but one stood out. "What exactly will I be doing?" I asked. He paused, just for a second. But that second felt longer than it should have. "You'll be helping manage client operations," he said. It sounded important. It sounded professional, but it also sounded vague. Too vague. I asked again. "Can you be more specific?" This time, his smile changed. Not completely, just enough for me to notice. "You'll understand once you start," he replied. That was the moment everything shifted. Because suddenly, the room felt smaller, the air felt heavier, and that quiet voice inside me, it got louder. I looked at the contract again. The number was still there, $100,000. Life-changing money. The kind of money that could solve almost all my problems. So why did it feel like I was about to make a mistake? I wish I could tell you I was brave, that I trusted my instincts without hesitation. But the truth is, I sat there in silence for a long time, fighting with myself. One voice said, "Take it. You'll regret it forever if you don't." The other whispered, "Walk away. Something is wrong." And when I finally spoke, even I didn't expect what I would say. "I'm sorry," I told him. "I can't accept this." The words felt unreal as they left my mouth, like I was watching someone else ruin my future. He didn't try to stop me. He didn't argue. He just nodded, like he already knew my answer. "Opportunities like this don't come twice," he said calmly. I forced a smile. "I understand." But deep down, I didn't. Not yet. That day, I walked out of that office with nothing. No job, no money, no plan. Just a strange feeling in my chest. A mix of fear, doubt, and something I couldn't explain. For the next 5 years, I would replay that moment again and again, wondering what my life would look like if I had said yes. Wondering if I had just thrown away the only chance I had. And then, 5 years later, I saw his face again, on the news, and everything changed. For a long time, nothing happened. No sudden success. No hidden opportunity waiting for me outside that office. Just silence and reality. The next morning, I woke up, and everything felt heavier. The same small room. The same unpaid bills sitting on my desk. The same phone with no new notifications. It was like the world didn't care that I had just walked away from $100,000. But I cared. A lot. At first, I tried to stay positive. I told myself I made the right decision. That job was strange, I kept repeating. You trusted your instincts. But confidence doesn't last long when rent is due. A week passed, then 2, then a month. Still no job. Have you ever doubted yourself so much That even your past decisions start to feel like mistakes? That's exactly where I was. Every night, I replayed that moment in my head. The contract, the number, his voice. You can start next week. I started to wonder, what if I was just scared? What if there was nothing wrong with the job and I simply didn't believe I deserved it? My friends didn't make it easier. One of them said, $100,000? And you said no? Are you serious? Another laughed and said, I would sign that in 5 seconds. I laughed with them. But inside, it hurt because part of me agreed. A few months later, things got worse. I had to move out of my apartment. I sold things I once thought I would never sell: my watch, my laptop, even some of my books. Each item felt like a small piece of my life disappearing. I eventually found a job, but it wasn't anything close to what I had been offered. Long hours, low pay, no real future, just enough to survive. And every time I felt tired, every time I looked at my bank account, that one thought came back. You chose this. Years passed like that. Slowly, quietly, painfully normal. I stopped talking about that offer, stopped thinking about it during the day. But at night, it always found its way back. Then one evening, everything changed. It was a normal day, nothing special. I had just come home from work, exhausted, and turned on the TV without thinking. The news was already playing. I wasn't really paying attention until I heard a familiar voice. At first, I thought I was imagining things. But then I looked up, and there he was. The same man, the same perfect smile. But this time, he wasn't sitting in a quiet office. He was standing in front of cameras, surrounded by reporters. And the words at the bottom of the screen made my heart stop. Company under investigation for fraud and illegal operations. I froze. Every sound in the room disappeared. I moved closer to the screen, just to make sure I wasn't mistaken. But I wasn't. It was him. The man who offered me $100,000. The man I almost said yes to. And in that moment, a question hit me harder than anything before. What exactly did I walk away from? I couldn't move. I just stood there, staring at the screen, trying to understand what I was seeing. The reporters kept talking. Words like fraud, investigation, illegal transactions echoed through the room. But my mind was stuck on one thing: that office, that contract, that moment. The news showed images of the company's building, police cars outside, people being escorted out, boxes of documents carried away. It didn't look anything like the quiet place I remembered. It looked exposed, like a secret that had been buried for years was finally forced into the light. I turned up the volume. Authorities believe this operation has been running for at least 6 years. 6 years! I did the math without thinking. 5 years ago, that was when I sat in that room. That was when they offered me the job. My chest felt tight because suddenly everything connected. The vague answers, the strange feeling. That 1 second pause before he replied to my question. You'll understand once you start. Now I understood, or at least I started to. I sat down slowly. My hands were cold, not from fear this time, but from realization. If I had said yes, I wouldn't just have a job. I would have been part of that company, part of whatever they were doing. And the news didn't stop there. They started interviewing former employees. Some faces were blurred, some voices were changed, but their stories were clear. We didn't know at first. They told us it was legal. By the time we realized, it was too late, too late. That phrase stayed with me because I remembered how desperate I was back then, how badly I needed that money, how easily I could have convinced myself to ignore the warning signs. One man spoke longer than the others. His voice was shaking. They paid well, he said, really well. That's how they kept us quiet. I felt something heavy sink in my stomach because that was exactly what they offered me, not just a job, but a reason not to ask questions. I leaned back and closed my eyes. And for the first time in 5 years, I didn't feel regret. I felt something else, something strange, something quiet, relief. But it didn't last long because right after that, another thought came, one that I wasn't ready for. What if I had accepted? Would I have noticed the truth early? Or would I have stayed like everyone else? Would I have walked away? Or would I have convinced myself it was normal? The truth is, I don't know. And that's what scared me the most, because I always believed I was the kind of person who would do the right thing. But back then, I was also the kind of person who needed money, desperately. The news ended. The room went silent again. But this time, the silence felt different, heavier, deeper, more honest. I opened my eyes and looked around. My small room, my simple life. Everything I once thought was a result of a bad decision. And for the first time, I saw it differently. Maybe I didn't lose anything that day. Maybe I escaped something. But even then, there was still one question I couldn't answer. If I really trusted my instincts back then, why did it take me 5 years to believe they were right? That question stayed with me for days. Not the kind you ask once and forget. The kind that follows you, quietly, into everything you do. Why didn't I trust myself? If my instincts were right, why did I spend 5 years feeling like I failed? I started looking back at my life during those years, not just the struggles, but the choices, the small ones I barely noticed at the time. I remembered the nights I couldn't sleep, not because of regret anymore, but because deep down, something didn't sit right with that offer. Even after I walked away, a part of me knew there was more to that story. I just didn't have proof. So I replaced that feeling with doubt. Isn't that what we often do? When we can't explain something, we assume we're wrong. A few days later, I saw another interview. This time, it was a former manager from that company. His face wasn't hidden. His name was public. And his story, it felt uncomfortably close. I had doubts from the beginning, he said. They never gave clear answers. Everything was always partial. I leaned forward, because that sounded exactly like my experience. But the money was too good, he continued. And after a while, you stop asking questions. That sentence hit harder than anything else, because I realized something simple and dangerous. It's not that people don't see the warning signs. It's that sometimes they choose not to. I paused the video, just sat there thinking, because 5 years ago, I almost made that same choice. Not because I was a bad person, but because I was tired. Tired of struggling, tired of feeling behind, tired of watching everyone else move forward. And when you're that tired, clarity becomes a luxury. You don't look for truth, you look for relief. That job was relief. Quick, easy, immediate. No more worrying about rent. No more comparing myself to others. No more feeling like I wasn't enough. But relief and truth are not always the same thing. I started to understand something I had never fully seen before. That moment in that office wasn't just about a job. It was a test, not of my intelligence, not of my skills, but of my awareness, my patience, my ability to walk away when something didn't feel right, even if I couldn't explain why. And I failed that test in my mind for 5 years because I measured success the wrong way. I looked at money, at status, at what I didn't have, and I called myself a failure. But now, for the first time, I saw the full picture. If I had said yes, I might have had money, maybe even a better apartment, a different life. But I also might have had something else: fear, stress, secrets, and a moment where walking away would no longer be simple. I took a deep breath, and something inside me finally settled. Maybe I didn't trust myself back then, but I listened. And sometimes, that's enough to change everything. Still, there was one last thing I needed to do. Something I had avoided for years. Something I wasn't sure I was ready for. I needed to find out what really happened inside that company from someone who lived through it. It took me 3 days to finally do it. 3 days of hesitation, of opening my phone, then putting it down again. Because once I knew the full story, there was no going back to what if. I found him through an old article. One of the former employees. The same man whose voice I heard on the news. It wasn't easy, but eventually I sent a message. Short, simple, careful. I think I was almost hired by the same company. Can I ask you something? I didn't expect a reply. But the next morning, there it was, just one sentence. Call me. My hands felt strangely heavy as I dialed the number. For a moment, I almost hung up. But then, he answered. His voice sounded older than I expected. Tired. Not weak, just worn out. We didn't talk about everything at once. At first, it was just small details, dates, positions, names, until finally. There was a pause, and he asked me a question I wasn't ready for. Did you accept the offer? I looked down, even though he couldn't see me. No, I said quietly. There was silence on the other end. Not awkward, not surprised, just silence. Then he said something I will never forget. You're lucky. I didn't know how to respond, so I just listened. They don't tell you everything at the beginning, he continued. It starts small, simple tasks. Nothing illegal, at least not obviously. I could almost see it. That office, that contract, that same beginning. But slowly, he said, things change. The numbers don't add up. You're asked to ignore certain details. And by the time you realize what's really happening, his voice stopped for a second. You're already part of it. A chill ran through me. Because I understood exactly what he meant, not a trap you walk into. A trap you slowly become. Why didn't you leave? I asked. The question came out softer than I expected. He didn't answer right away, and when he did, it was honest. Painfully honest. Because by then, I had something to lose. That sentence stayed with me. Because 5 years ago, I had nothing. No money, no position, no stability, just uncertainty. And somehow, that uncertainty saved me. We talked a little longer, but nothing he said mattered more than that one truth. Sometimes, the worst opportunities don't look dangerous. They look perfect. After the call ended, I sat there for a long time, not thinking about the past anymore, but about the future. Because I finally understood something simple, but powerful. The best decisions in your life won't always feel right in the moment. They won't always make sense. People might question you. You might question yourself. But time will reveal what you couldn't see. That day, 5 years ago, I thought I lost everything. But now I know I protected everything I didn't even have yet. So if you're watching this, and you're standing in front of a decision that feels too good to be true, take a moment. Listen closely, not to the noise around you, but to that quiet voice inside. Because it might be the only thing standing between you and a life you'll regret. If this story made you think or reminded you of a moment in your own life, take a second to share it in the comments. I read every single one. And sometimes, your story might help someone else make the right decision. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Because every story here is a lesson someone learned the hard way. So you don't have to.